Josh Haston here, Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. It is Monday, the 27th of August, 2018, the 16th of Elul, 5778. Another Jewish New Year about to come to an end. Looking forward to Rosh Hashanah and everything that's in store for 5779. Hope you're doing well in your part of the world. Don't forget, you can always get in touch with me during the week. Josh at thelandofisrael.com. On Facebook, it is Joshua Haston. And on Twitter at Josh Haston. Now, we're going to start with some news from the U.S. This morning. Broadcasting from Jerusalem here, Monday morning, Israel time. At least 2 people were killed on Sunday after a gunman opened fire at a video game tournament in Jacksonville, Florida. Police believe the shooter to be 24-year-old David Katz of Baltimore, who was found dead at the scene of a self-inflicted gunshot. This according to the Jacksonville sheriff. Suspected shooter fired off numerous rounds at the Jacksonville Landing, a downtown recreation center, where the EA Sports Madden NFL 19 Championship Series was being held. This reported by Time.com. Now, why did I open with it's a tragedy, first of all, but why did I open with a story out of the U.S.? The huge gun debates taking place in the U.S., and people are always looking to Israel to try to understand how, while Israel has terrorism and different types of attacks, these types of things are extremely rare. Now, a decade ago, I said on the radio, on the old station, those of you who have been listening to me for that long, I don't know, perhaps maybe there are people out there who have been listening to me for that long. I said on air that one day the U.S. will become just like Israel, and you will have guards at the malls, you will have guards going into the movie theaters, any public concerts, venues, any public venue where a lot of people are gathering, you will have guards. I said that about a decade ago, and I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong. Because despite 9/11, the aftermath of 9/11, and yes, you do have the security at the airports and the TSA, you don't have those guards stationed outside of these public venues where people, large amounts of people, are gathered for these events. I was absolutely wrong. In other words, the U.S. isn't like Israel. The U.S. did not learn from 9/11 that a sad reality is the fact that you do need guards outside of the schools, outside of the malls, outside of the places of worship in order to prevent the types of attacks that happened over and over again in the U.S., including yesterday's attack in Jacksonville. Now, we can debate, and people are debating on Twitter and all over the world every time one of these attacks happens in terms of the gun laws. And I can see why people are upset. Now, I don't know if in this shooting or in other shootings, this murderer had a gun legally or perhaps it was illegal. I don't know the legislation in his community. But nevertheless, I believe 100% that what needs to happen in the U.S. is putting guns in the hands of those who are trained to stop these types of attacks. And that, thank God, is what we have, unfortunately, but thank God that is what we have here in Israel. Trained guards outside of these venues. Okay? And in Israel, by the way, it is harder for a civilian to get a gun than it is in the U.S. So, in other words, we do have laws which prevent those who should not have guns from getting them, but we have trained security guards stationed outside of all of the public venues, whether you're talking about movie theaters, malls, any type of concert or whatnot. I know in the U.S., outside football games, basketball games, there are security checks, but this is 2018, people, and you have so many different terror groups running around the world. You have these lone gunmen carrying out these horrible acts, these horrible atrocities. There have to be people out there who understand this reality, as sad as it is, and implement the types of security measures we see here in Israel. And by the way, I don't think I talked about this on last week's show, but Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan, reported by the Jerusalem Post, actually this past week relaxed Israel's gun control criteria. But what did he do? He didn't say that now everyone can get a gun. He said that the hundreds of thousands of IDF infantry unit veterans should be able to receive firearms licenses. In addition, Erdogan decided officers and commanders will not be required to return their arms and weapons after they are released from reserve duty. These are trained IDF infantry unit veterans. These are the people who should continue to carry guns and be prepared. As Erdogan said, quote, in the Jerusalem Post, many civilians save lives during terror attacks, and in an era of lone terrorism, the more skilled civilians carrying weapons, the greater the chance of thwarting attacks without casualties and reducing the number of casualties. So this, I believe, wholeheartedly. You put the guns in the hands of those who know how to use guns, those who have IDF training, those who go through and qualify after a rigorous background check and everything else that Israel does. These are the people who should have guns. And it's very unfortunate what happened in Jacksonville and all the other attacks over the past year and several years. And this isn't a Donald Trump thing. Okay, the Columbine attacks in the school there in Colorado happened way before Donald Trump. You have people on Twitter automatically blaming the President of the United States and the NRA and the Republicans or whatnot. Look how it's done. Israel should be the example of how it is done, getting the guns in the hands of the right people and having guards stationed outside of these public venues. Anyway, I wanted to open the show with that because this just happened overnight in the U.S., and we send our condolences to the victims there. In other news, front page of today's Jerusalem Post, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman instructed the IDF to reopen Gaza's Erez crossing as of Monday morning. This morning, following consultations, the Defense Ministry spokesman cited the, quote, security calm that has been maintained over the past week and the significant drop in violent incidents. So they're saying there's a drop. They're saying things look better, yet in the same article in the J Post, it says the following: Lieberman's decision on Sunday to reopen the crossing came despite additional violent riots on the Gaza border on Friday. So I'm not understanding this. I don't understand why we would reopen the Erez crossing. I don't understand why we are proud to send thousands of tons of humanitarian aid to Gaza each and every day when Hamas intercepts that aid, intercepts the fuel, uses them to manufacture more rockets, uses the construction material to build more terror tunnels. We are sadly enabling Hamas. Israel, we are enabling Hamas with this humanitarian aid. Stop the aid, turn off the electricity. You're going to get blasted by the world community regardless. But perhaps there will be a brighter future when the people of Gaza decide enough is enough. If Israel's not willing through military means, and I'm not advocating for more soldiers, Israeli soldiers being sent into Gaza, I don't want to see that happen. But if Israel's not willing to overthrow Hamas, let the people in Gaza realize that they have a better future without Hamas in charge. It'll be better for everyone. It'll be better for Israel. It'll be better for the residents of Gaza. They have to realize it, and it'll take some unfortunate circumstances to make that happen, I believe. But we have to stop. Israel has to stop enabling Hamas by providing all of this humanitarian aid and electricity and letting them continue to rule. It is in our hands. We can stop it, but we have to be smart about it, and we have to act. In other news, the Times of Israel and many other outlets reporting that the Trump administration has decided to cut more than $200 million in aid to the so-called Palestinians. This announced by the State Department on Friday, suggesting those taxpayer funds no longer served American interests. The move is the result of a review of U.S. assistance to the PA, a Palestinian authority that U.S. President Donald Trump ordered in January. Quote, as a result of that review, at the direction of the President, we will direct more than $200 million in economic support funds originally planned for programs in the West Bank and Gaza Those funds will now address high-priority projects elsewhere. Well done once again. I don't know what this peace plan, is going to say. There are all these speculations of what's going to be in the new Trump peace plan. I don't know. But in the meantime, everything is positive from the Trump administration when it comes to Israel. The Trump administration said that the Hamas terror group's control of Gaza was one of the main reasons it wanted to cease aid to the Gaza Strip. Okay, so the U.S. recognizes that Hamas shouldn't be getting this money. Israel should recognize it as well and stop with the humanitarian aid, as I just said a few minutes ago. And on cue, despite the Trump administration's decision, some U.S. Jewish groups, so-called liberal, I call them anti-Israel, called the cuts detrimental to efforts to bring peace. This would exacerbate. Am I saying that right? Palestinian suffering, as groups such as J Street and whatnot protesting the move, which isn't surprising. I mean, it's unbelievable, but it's not surprising. Here's a quote from J Street. Trump's decision would have a devastating impact on innocent women and children and families, arguing that they were intended to cruelly punish Palestinian civilians and marginalize and undercut Palestinian leadership. Doesn't matter anything the Trump administration says, J Street's going to come out against it. But of course, they don't blame Hamas for stealing the humanitarian aid and the funding. They blame Donald Trump. We've gone down this path now. It's almost the 25th anniversary of the, I don't want to call it the anniversary of the Oslo process here. And what have we seen in 25 years other than over 1,500 Israelis murdered, 3 Gaza operations, and so much more? It's time to change course. And I think the Trump administration, for now at least, gets it. And just blindly sending so much aid into the PA, which usually just goes into Mahmoud Abbas's coffers or goes into the coffers of Hamas. The U.S. is starting to get it, and I think Israel needs to jump on board as well. In sporting news, the international soccer body FIFA on Friday banned the head of the Palestinian Football Association from attending soccer games for a year for inciting hatred and violence toward Lionel Messi. Are we seeing some justice in FIFA? This is an unbelievable story. Jabril Rajoub, known Palestinian Authority Fatah terrorist, who's the head of the Olympic Committee and the so-called Palestinian Football Association, encouraged fans, if you remember this, to burn posters of Lionel Messi and shirts if, in fact, his Argentinian national soccer team came to play in Israel. Unfortunately, this past June, the team, Argentina, backed out of their friendly tournament or match against the Israeli national soccer team. But Rajoub was at the forefront of inciting against Lionel Messi, and the Argentinian team claimed that they had death threats, and there's all sorts of politics that went into the story as well. But at the end of the day, Argentina canceled their match here in Israel, and Jabril Rajoub definitely shares some of that blame. So as punishment for inciting violence against Messi, Rajoub was banned from attending any soccer matches, according to Times of Israel, in an official capacity for a full year. He was also fined around $20,000 by FIFA. FIFA decided to begin disciplinary proceedings against Rajoub in June after Israel lodged a complaint with the organization over his calls for posters and jerseys of Messi to be burned, as well as his threats to thwart Argentina's bid to host the World Cup in 2030. So well done, FIFA, by sticking it to this terrorist Jabril Rajoub. And you can go on Google and search very easily and find Jabril Rajoub's incitement to violence, anti-Israel hate, his decades and decades of support of terror against Israel. It's not that hard to find. Well done, FIFA. Now, with some good news, there's also some negative news here. The European Union is at it again. What are they doing? Bolstering Iran. According to a report in Israel Hayom, the EU pledges $21 million in Iranian aid to keep the nuclear deal alive. Of course, the U.S. backed out of the nuclear deal. However, the EU is trying to keep that bad deal alive, trying to resuscitate it. The European Union on Thursday announced that its financial support package to help bolster Iran's economy to the tune of $21 million will take place. The aid comes as part of the bloc's commitment to keep the 2015 Iran nuclear deal alive, despite President Trump's decision to pull out of the deal. Again, we're talking about $58 million to help Iran cope with economic and social challenges. EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini said in a statement, the bloc is committed to cooperation with Iran. Of course you are, because President Trump made you look like a fool. That's number one. Made you all look like fools. And number two, you are helping to pave the path towards an Iranian nuclear regime out of Tehran. Yes, you are, European Union. Look in the mirror. She said Mogherini said this new package will widen economic and sectoral relations in areas that are of direct benefit to our citizens. Despite this and their commitment to bolster Iran, a number of European companies announced they're pulling out of projects, scrapping investment plans in Iran, because it's either Iran or America. You have to make your decision, thanks to Donald Trump, President Trump. At the same time, Republican lawmakers in the U.S. are calling for Iran to be expelled from the main financial system that oversees international bank transfers, the SWIFT network. Yes, Iran should be thrown out of SWIFT. The Iranian regime should be thrown out of power, and more support should be given to the Iranian people who want to see the mullahs out of there. That has not developed as we hoped for over the last several years. Despite all of this, all these protests in Iran, the mullahs are still in charge. The ayatollahs are still in charge. That needs to end for the sake of the world. It's not just an Israel issue. It's not just a U.S. issue. It's a world issue. And the European Union, once again, on the wrong side of history. Speaking of moral clarity, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, who was just in Israel, by the way, announced the U.S. will be cutting funds for the UN, so-called UN Human Rights Council, and they may cut more funds to additional UN agencies. He said, quote, "We are going to defund the Human Rights Council," and warned that other UN agencies would also be up for cuts in U.S. funding. The U.S. pays about 22% of the UN budget, and this is welcomed here because of the constant anti-Israel bias in the various U.S. agencies, UN agencies rather. Public Security and Strategic Affairs Minister Gilad Erdan, welcomed the decision. He said, quote, "The UN's human rights body have undermined their founding values by becoming hotbeds of anti-Israel extremism, hate, and boycott campaigns." He added, if Bolton's announcement spurs the UN to start investing in exposing the world's worst violators of human rights rather than in delegitimizing the Middle East's one true democracy, millions around the world will benefit. In June, according to Israel Hayom, the U.S. announced its decision to leave the Council, condemning the hypocrisy of its members and its unrelenting bias against Israel. So thank you, everyone involved there, Bolton, John Bolton, of course, Secretary Nikki Haley, and everyone else who is finally, after all these years, taking the UN to task for its blatant anti-Israel bias. Let's see how many different UN agencies the U.S. pulls out of. Let's pay attention to how much funding the U.S. continues to divert instead of turning it over to these anti-Israel haters out of the UN. We spoke about this, I believe, last week on the show, reported here by the Jewish press. There was an Arab from the Hebron area who smuggled a knife into Jerusalem, and he was intending to murder a Jew, and now the Jerusalem District Court on Thursday has indicted this man, Saliman Kapisha, 26-year-old resident of Hebron, for preparing a deadly stabbing and for possession of a knife. Turns out he decided to carry out an attack in the old city of Jerusalem. He was specifically looking for a religious Jew. He brought the knife in, made it into Jerusalem. His plan was to use pepper spray, blind a victim, and then stab him to death. And luckily, at the last minute, it was one evening in Jerusalem, he decided he was going to wait and carry out the attack the next day. Police spotted him as being suspicious. They searched his bag. He tried to run, tried to flee the scene. It was caught. And now he faces hopefully many, many years behind bars in an Israeli prison. Thank God his attack was thwarted. In other news, over the weekend here in Israel, the headline here from the Jerusalem Post is left-wing activists attacked photographing illegal settler. I think there's an error here. But left-wing, I don't call them left-wing, I call them anti-Israel activists. According to this report, they claim they were physically attacked by so-called settlers on Saturday while taking pictures of construction in Mitzpeh Yair, that's in the southern Hebron Hills. The IDF, however, which helped evacuate them from the scene, these anti-Israel haters from this NGO called Tayush, the IDF is blaming the activists for the attack. According to this report, the activists approached the Israeli community of Mitzpeh Yair and instigated a provocation at the scene. A confrontation then evolved between the group and the Israeli community's residents. This according to an army spokesperson. In other words, probably, and I haven't seen any other reports, but I'm sure in the Arab media and in other, even Israeli media, if you would just look on the surface, you would think, here's another case of those big bad settlers attacking these peaceful demonstrators and protesters. But in reality, what you have here, and the IDF spokesperson's office admits it, thankfully, you have Jews in the southern Hebron Hills trying to keep a peaceful Shabbat, and you have these haters approaching their community, taking pictures, causing a melee there. And I'm glad that the IDF recognized this and said it was these people who instigated this provocation. I mean, imagine that. You're sitting at home trying to enjoy the Shabbat, the Sabbath, and people start coming into your windows, taking pictures of your family, and causing, as they say in Israel, a balagan, chaos inside of your community. So in this case, troops at the scene declared the area a closed military zone to prevent further confrontation. The activists, or radicals I call them, refused to leave, violating the order, and they had to be taken out of there by the IDF. But we see this nearly every weekend in different communities. These Israel haters have nothing better to do with their Shabbat other than try to cause chaos and try to provoke the residents of Judea and Samaria. Other news, this is unfortunate, reported also by the Jerusalem Post on the front page this morning. A 5-year drought brings bodies of water to historically low levels. I'm not going to get into all the details here, but bottom line is we are facing a severe drought. This is a 5-year drought here in Israel. The Kinneret, the Lake of Galilee, at a near all-time low. The good news is they are forecasting that this will be a wet winter. The final report on that will come out in the next month by the Israeli Meteorological Society. But nevertheless, it may take more than one wet winter to help change the situation on the ground. We have been suffering tremendously as a result. The farmers and the growers here in Israel. So what I would ask is that you pray for rain here in Israel. I mean, we pray for rain. Jews all over the world pray for rain after the Sukkot holiday. Unfortunately, the last 5 years, and there are all sorts of biblical sources talking about if you don't act properly and whatnot. And I'm not here to play God, and I don't know why it's happening, and I can't pinpoint a reason, but something is wrong. Okay, something is wrong if we are experiencing a 5-year drought, that's for sure. So in that case, we need to look in the mirror here in Israel, see what we're doing. Again, I can't play God. I can't tell you exactly what we're doing wrong, but each and every one of us needs to look in the mirror. That's number one. Number two, we have to continue to pray for rain. And those around the world listening to the program, if you want to do something meaningful for the state of Israel, I would ask that you pray for rain this winter. And we're going to need it not only this winter, but in winters ahead. So we'd appreciate that very much. And ending the show on something positive, as we try to do each and every week here on Israel Uncensored, on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. Israelis win silver, bronze, and bronze at European Windsurfing Championships, reported by TOI. Israelis Yoav Omer and Shachar Tsuberi won the silver and bronze medal, respectively, Saturday at the RSX European Championships in Poland. This is another wonderful sports story here. Omer, who's 18 years old, won the gold at the 2016 Youth Sailing World Championship, also in Poland. Tsuberi won bronze at the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. He's also a European champion. So congratulations to Israeli windsurfers, and keep up the great work representing the state of Israel. Good luck in all your future endeavors and in the water there with the windsurfing championships. That's going to do it here for today. My name is Josh Haston. This is Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com for Monday, August 27th, 2018, the 16th of Elul 5778. From Jerusalem, don't forget, you can get in touch with me during the week. Josh at thelandofisrael.com. On Facebook, it's Joshua Haston, and on Twitter at Josh Haston. Most importantly, between now and when we speak again, please God, next Monday, everybody out there in the wonderful world of ours, be safe. Shalom, shalom from Jerusalem, Israel.
Hi, this is Eve Harrow, host of Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. You can hear a new show from me every Sunday, and every day of the week, shows from another one of my very talented fellow show hosts. Reach me, Eve, at thelandofisrael.com, and keep listening, everybody. We love your feedback. The Land of Israel, coming at you every day, every week. That's the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com.